And I'm happy to provide a reason for that. I guess when the appropriate time is, maybe that's now.
Yeah, go ahead, talk to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously I have an on license. GL Events has an on license to manage alcohol at Mighty River Domain, but I also was a big instigator of the liquor bans at Mighty River Domain. So I feel like I have a very balanced view when it comes to alcohol and a huge amount of experience as well. So yeah, I sort of would like to stay part of the discussions, but also part of the voting as well. But I'm happy to take advice if you feel differently.
Today's.
I think probably need to just be a little bit careful in terms of what is said.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I think the two of you probably just need to be a little bit careful in terms of what you say in terms of influencing opinion. Certainly that experience would be very valuable from both of you, but just be a little bit careful there. And obviously, when it comes to a more formal setting and decision making, I think at that point, you would have to exclude yourself. That would be my view.
Okay. Is that a good enough steer for you too? Yeah, I'm comfortable with remaining. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, welcome. Mika, would you like to introduce this item? Nice to see you.
Sorry, there's a lot of organisation there.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, so hello everyone. This is just a little introduction workshop to the local alcohol policy review. So take it, hopefully you've all had time to read the associated report and memo. We'll just crack into it. So yeah, what we're going to cover today is what is involved in the review process, all the different options you have available. The ultimate aim of this workshop is more to give everyone the opportunity to learn about the process and to make sure that we're all clear on what everything means and what the different options are, because it is, the more you look at it, the more complex it gets. So we just want to make sure that everyone's okay with that. And yeah, so if you have any questions at all, please yell out. And yeah, if you do feel that you can provide direction, that would be appreciated, but understanding that it might not be time just yet. And to help us with this process, we have our wonderful experts in the field. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, I'll introduce our friends in a moment, but I'll just give you a quick little rundown on what is covered. So yeah, we're pretty early in the process. You can see we've already, the review has been triggered. It has to be reviewed every 6 years. We've done some background research with the help of the police, licensing inspectors, and medical officer of health or representative. Normally you do this a little bit later in the process when you've produced a draft policy, but it does make sense to ask the people who actually deal with these things at the coalface, what are the options for including in the draft policy. So we're just starting a little bit earlier. Sorry, my staple fell out all over the place. Here we go. So yeah, the policy sets out the requirements around the number and location of alcohol licenses and licensed premises, when these can operate. This is the primary way that local communities can have their say in how alcohol is managed in the district. And this is, it's a little bit complicated, but the local alcohol policy is ultimately implemented by the police, the licensing inspectors, and the medical officers of health, who, while it provides a framework for the district licensing committee to actually make the final decisions. And this all comes underneath the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, the purpose of which is that the sale, supply, and consumption of alcohol should be undertaken safely and responsibly, and that the harm caused by the excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol should be minimized. So yeah, in Waipa, we currently have 140 licenses. It's broken down there into on licenses, off licenses, and club licenses, with the licenses located in Cambridge on the left in the lighter colours, and in Te Awamutu and surroundings on the right with the darker colours.
Could I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Just going back to it, can you go back a slide, please? I can see that on the on licenses, and in fact, looking at the comparative populations, the Cambridge and TA are approximately the same ratio as the population. So 43 for Cambridge, 30 for TA. The same with off licenses, same ratio related to the population. But the club licenses, totally out of ratio. So the 9 for Cambridge would relate to about, don't know, 6 for TA. Why the high number of club licenses in TA?
That is perhaps a question for Carl.
I'm not 100% sure. Timber's going to take a lot of surrounding towns. I'm assuming Ahaupo, Kiki, Parongia will all be within the Te Awamutu stats, whereas Cambridge is probably only Cambridge and Leamington. So we do have a lot of those outlying historic rugby clubs that still have alcohol licenses on the Te Awamutu side. And I don't believe Cambridge only has the Cosmopolitan Club, I believe, as a chartered club as such, whereas Te Awamutu has RSA, Workmen's Club, and the Te Awamutu Club. That would be my off-the-cuff theory.
Okay. Just seemed unusual. Thank you.
I just kind of wanted to add to that too, just with my experience with Ahaupo, is that it was originally a club license, but club licenses are more restrictive. And so as that venue became more of a community facility, we then decided to apply for an on license instead, because it was more fitting and less restrictive and was more encompassing as a community. Club licenses require you to list non-members as they're walking through the door, very restrictive, whereas you know, an on license gives you more flexibility as a community to cater for funerals, for example, which, you know, you wouldn't have time to apply for a special. So an on license just enables that a lot better. So that's my theory around it as well.
Thanks for that, Liz.
Excellent. So yeah, that brings us to our guest speakers. So they are going to introduce themselves, but just to take note, they are more here as experts. So as we step through the options, they're here to help clarify some of the points that they suggested we could include in the lab. So yeah, more so than to give you a long talk. But yeah, Anish, you can start.
It's just good afternoon now. As Anish Chen, I'm the environmental health team leader and also the chief licensing inspector. I have dealt with some of you already in terms of licensing. Yes, I think we're not here to put restriction on businesses. I think what we would like to make it clear is we are basing on the Alcohol Act, which is to, you know, reduce harm arising from excessive drinking, and also providing a safe consumption area. So normally if people don't drink excessively, it's not a problem. But if you probably look at my report from page 132 of your attachments, you'll see we have included some of the areas where we had problems with the businesses, and it's just an indicative of what can happen. And local alcohol policy, what it does is it gives us a tool actually, and you've got the powers to decide what do you want us, to have a better control over the district. Because sometimes what happens is if we don't have a policy, we are not able to impose conditions, because then it becomes an evidence base. Some of the things we've come across is, people saying a lot of off licenses in our town. But unfortunately, we have gone combined with MOH and police, sometimes we've lost the case because we didn't have enough evidence to say that there will be a problem. A classic example is Ohapo School, where a school principal was not really in favor of another off license. Yeah, but we didn't have evidence. So what it does is it gives us a sort of bit more tools to be able to implement, sort of usually by a DLC. So I think if you look in our report, what we're trying to achieve is, because we have learned from the policy we had, we tested it, and we have learned also from others actually what they have done better, or what could be done better. And we have also had some High Court and Supreme Court cases which says is public opinion matters. So you guys can always consult the public to see what's best for our community. And it doesn't have to be evidence-based. So what it can be based is, it can be based on a test if we're actually trying to reduce alcohol harm. And harm is in the community. We should not actually probably put our thinking based on, we don't see it in the streets. We don't have graffiti, we don't have, damaging properties, but it's probably not reported. Yeah, or probably it's actually, it's happening, we don't really know. Yeah, so some of those we have tried to highlight, it's in the report. So what we're hoping to is we continue to actually embrace the lab policy and put a bit more controls, but at the same time, we do it in a way that actually, it doesn't actually control development in future. Yeah, so that's what we're hoping to actually achieve from this policy. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'm not Dave Hall. I'm the next one down.
Can I ask a question of Anish before we go on?
Sure thing. Apologies, Nicole.
Anish, yeah, I think your report is tremendously interesting. Just looking at your page 5 of your report, which is 147 of our agenda, you've got a police data obtained from Te Awamutu Police indicates Waipa DC has greater alcohol-related offences when compared to Waitomo and Otorohanga, with cases almost 5-fold greater when compared to neighbouring districts. Now that sounds very dire, but actually if you look at the number of cases compared to the population, Otorohanga has 25.7 to the 1,000. Waitomo has 27 to the 1,000, but actually Waipa has only got 23.3 to the 1,000. So actually the incidence in Waipa related to population is a lot less than the other two districts, which is slightly different to the inference that you make in your report.
Yeah, probably agree with that one. But we do also have to look at it. I think comparing the data with population, yes, it's true, reflecting that. But our district is somewhat bit different to other councils, being we've got suburbs, whereas the other districts don't. Yeah, and I think what really tends to happen is one incident becomes a greater perception in the community. So I think that's what we're just trying to implicate, sort of suggest here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Just quickly, from experience, we've found that Te Awamutu has more social life. you're looking at Otrahonga and you're looking at Tikawiti, youth tend to travel to where there is the opportunity to socialise, and we have bars that do open till late in the night that do operate with a nightlife. So that seems to attract them. So, and also a lot of them play sport up here and stay up here on that Saturday evening. So that all impacts on our figures just a little bit. So you want to be aware of that.
I think that's actually a great point. Actually, we become a central hub. At one point before COVID, we actually used to be a Friday town to go to in Waikato. So Friday was actually the patrons from Hamilton were traveling to actually south to come over here. So yeah, and we also have for tourism because they're crossing through. So yeah, it does increases the population and the risk. Yes, thank you.
Claire.
I'd just like to ask the question of you, Anish. In your report, you also recommend that a survey is undertaken. So that was on page 2 of your report, or page 144 of our agenda. It said some councils seek the views of their residents and alcohol businesses before developing a draft policy by undertaking surveys and use that as a guideline to determine what's actually needed. So at the moment, there's no recommendation about whether or not we should do that. And I'm not sure whether or not you think that it would be a good exercise to maybe undertake that survey prior to doing our consultation on and seeking submissions. Like, is that what you would be recommending?
I think it depends on when you want to actually see that happen. Usually a draft policy probably should be based on what our thinking is originally. So I would suggest this survey actually happens before we actually do a draft, because it gives us, probably you guys, a lot of ideas what community wants. And I'm not sure Auckland did a survey, but whether they did at the second draft or first, I'm not sure actually. Yeah.
It's definitely an approach we've taken in the past, is doing a little survey beforehand. Again, just because it's such a complex problem, and it's good to get a feel of what the community would actually want in the draft policy, rather than just sending out a draft policy and then, you know, opening the floodgates. So yeah, just to narrow it down, be recommended.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'd certainly support it. I mean, I'm not exposed to the kind of incidents that were reported, you know, that you've detailed in here. I actually found it pretty shocking, and I really felt for like the police and bar managers who are having to deal with these issues. And so I thought the suggestions made about improving processes and the management of the facilities and even CCTV coverage and good lighting, so that it means that any incidents can be reported and, you know, prosecutions made in that, because even those things were difficult, you know, because I suppose of the informal nature of the arrangements and things like that. Yeah, so I thought that was really helpful to have that all in your report. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I did wanted to bring in a highlight to you. It's also based on a fact that Supreme Court decided if it's a public perception, it could be in the lab without evidence. And what it means is it cannot be appealed. So, and that gives a lot of tools and powers for council to decide. But also having said that, survey can go the other side where people might say, oh no, we don't need a lab. Yeah. So it's just how we do it. It just depends. Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick little housekeeping thing before we move forward. If it's possible, if you refer to a page number, just for our guests, could you refer to the page number on their report, not in diligent? Just makes it a bit easier for them. And also apologies for David Hall. He is just across the road, so he can be summoned if really needed to clarify something. He is on standby.
Thank you for having me today. So I am employed formerly by the Waikato District Health Board, but now Te Whatu Ora, and the Medical Officer of Health Delegate role. So like Anish, we inquire into applications. In our submissions, hopefully you've got a copy of this in the appendix. We provided some information. When public health are looking at applications or license applications, we've had a bit of experience in this area. We tend to focus on public health reasons for opposing licenses or supporting the community. So in this information pack, we've provided our hospital emergency department data. And hopefully there should be some acute and chronic data in there for you to have a look at. This showed within your region for ED hospital presentations and admissions that Leamington and Te Awamutu had some of the highest presentations for us. So hopefully you take some of that into account when you're looking at your LAP. I also wish to congratulate you on, as a council, for having an LAP. It's something that not a lot of councils have been able to achieve. So the fact that you're looking at reviewing it, very well done to have had one in place for so long, and we'd fully support you renewing it as well. We do think it has made a difference, but in the 6 years that this LAP has been in place, I've also included a little bit of anecdotal, what the community has objected on, and predominantly it's been around bottle store off licenses and their proximity to those kinds of facilities, so childcare facilities, churches and other high-risk facilities. So I put a little bit of that in our report as well, and provided a list of recommendations that public health would hopefully encourage you to have a look at and maybe adopt. But yeah, hopefully if you have any questions, let me know about what we've provided.
Oh, cool. I want to say it's pretty sobering, and it's probably the wrong word.
Not so sure of that question, but it kind of makes
Andrew.
the thanks, Susan. It kind of makes the gambling thing that we've been looking at look like a small change.
Yeah.
This is but obviously alcohol is so embedded in our culture that it's a very difficult thing to stop altogether, which, reading the reports would be the ideal outcome. So yeah, no, thanks for all the information. It's good.
Thank you. I think the Supreme Court really, the decision out of Auckland really supports you in taking what your community believe is important and adopting it. So yeah, there's been some great stuff out of that decision. Hopefully we get more LAPs across the country as a result of that.
Mike, Dale, then Liz.
Thanks through the chair. Just a question. So you sort of mentioned, it sort of comes up if an off license wants to come within, say, so many meters of a, say, a kindergarten or a preschool or maybe a school even. But what about the other way around? What if the off license is there and a preschool wants to, move in essentially almost to the same building? How does that work?
Well, currently, the LAP only applies to new licenses, so it doesn't work the other way around.
Yeah, right.
That would be the case with Liquorland Cambridge by Lakeside.
Exactly.
A childcare centre moved in afterwards, yes.
Yeah,
so it wasn't applicable.
We did identify as one of those issues, actually police raised it to us, is what can we do, better? So we came up with this concept about external advertising. Yeah, because if you read the reports on alcohol harm, the greatest exposure impact they can have is on a young child. So we thought is one of the reasons how we can do better is there's been a case law too. We can just limit the external advertising, and even can go as far as actually using the word actually, what products they do sell. Then a classic example is Ohapo Bottle Store, where they can't do external advertising. So if you go past, you'll see a blank, a place, but now you'll see a sandwich flag actually, a sandwich board with products they sell. So they find the ways to do it. So we just there are some ways we can, but in this one is more about new business. Yeah.
Nicole, may I ask a point of clarification?
Dale Marie was about to talk, but
oh, sorry.
Then you, Roger.
Thank you.
Mike actually asked the question that I was wondering about, but I just want to thank you for your data. I've worked in alcohol and drug before. I actually think alcohol should be reclassed, should be class A, because of the amount of impact that it does. when we look at what it does at a A&E level and how that offsets, yeah, I wish that we could probably bill a few people when they come into A&E to offset some of those damages. So thank you for your data. Thank you both, all of you, for your report. Kia ora.
Our health data won't be including GP presentations and people who just decide to just walk off the sprained ankle and other things and don't seek proper medical attention and then end up with long-term health effects from that.
Thank you. Liz, then Roger.
I guess it's been a really, over the years, and I'm recalling some of my university days here, when it was, the norm to have a pub crawl on a bicycle and things like that. We've come a long way and in the right direction as well. And I just echo what Dale Marie said, there's a lot of harm out there and it is ingrained, but I'd like to think that new regulations over the years have seen us move into a better space. I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction and strongly support the local alcohol policy as well. I do think that we need to look at the number of off licenses in our towns. I recall not long ago when we had new businesses moving into town, strong Facebook comments from the community about how many is too many. And I feel that we should look at a cap. So I'm supportive of that in terms of a bit of a direction. The visibility or proximity to sensitive areas is a tricky one. And I think that especially now that we're encouraging high density, it is going to be something that we continue to really grapple with. I was pretty happy with the outcome with the Lickland in Cambridge and the childcare centre, no matter which way it went, because the visibility isn't there necessarily. They're at opposite ends of a giant building and their front-facing areas is quite different. But I like the idea of limiting external advertising. I think that's really key to this as well. So I strongly support that going forward. So those are just my comments. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree, Liz. Roger, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Can I refer to page 24 in your report? When you talk about the high deprivation areas, and I see that in the centre of Cambridge, you've got basically the area which is Lake Te Kutu and the CBD, which is mostly commercial and retail, as a high deprivation area.
Sorry, is there a question in there?
I'm wondering if is it a high deprivation area? I would have thought that it was an area where there's little deprivation because they're all commercial properties. There's no residential in that area, or very little.
Yeah, because it does go off the number of people in there, the deprivation. So this is data that Te Whatu Ora would have come up with. This is national deprivation level, same as what the gambling one was. So it is adjusted for population.
Okay, that's the reason. Good, thank you. And regarding the sensitive areas, and possibly not a question for you, Nicole, because it probably is not in your area, but the sensitive area of reserves and public spaces, would that mean that the exclusion area referred to the green belt? So the green belt all the way around the town would have an exclusion area 500 metres either side of that? I'm just wondering how limiting that would be.
I'll just clarify a few things actually. What we have recommended is putting a bit more distance to the sensitive sites in broadening the definition, including Marae and other things, but we are not actually suggesting is we restrict any issue of off license. If you read the statement which says is DLC can still consider. So what it also does is actually is if we have also included a statement where a local impact report probably to be done. So what it does is actually it gives inspectors the ability to actually report on more criteria than what's in the Act. Because at the moment, if it's not there, smart lawyer comes in and just says, this is not a criteria we should consider. And it just gets shoved. So what we suggest is, yes, you do. And in previously, it was any significant issue. So unless it's a significant issue, DLC was not able to actually decide on that. So what we're saying is actually should be, actually, I think I quoted the word, or we quoted the word, something like no more than minor effects. So obviously, if you come across any premises, you'll see a bottle or a can of alcohol. That's a minor effect. But if you come across things like where a new business wants to go is constantly people are, drinking outside the premises, they're urinating in the area, they're causing vandalism. So that's what we're saying is that should be the area that we probably have greater controls where they could say no. So actually it gives DLC ability to still decide. So it doesn't restrict, actually it gives us a more criteria to report on and be able to actually explore a bit further.
Clear.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just a few things about what was raised with a business that is already established and then a sensitive operation wants to set up next to them. I mean, you said it wasn't part of the LAP, because it only applies to new licenses. Yeah, but I think it's really important that you were able to go through all of the process to ensure that the exposure to those advertising messages was really minimised for people that are using that early childhood centre. So I'm thinking, is that signalling that we should be expanding the LAP to specifically address that situation where you've got someone that's already got a licence for alcohol, but you're getting a sensitive facility wanting to set up next to them? Like, do you feel that the controls are sufficient, or that we should be looking at strengthening that when we review the LAP? And then I've got a couple of other questions too. Yeah.
I think simple answer is probably not enough, is there? Whether we can implement greater controls for those existing business. I like to think maybe Carl can correct, actually. Carl probably has got more experience than me. Yes, DLC can consider the impacts it can have, and as a condition of a license, they can consider that. I think what LAP gives us actually an opportunity to actually include that as an assessment to do that, but we might have to sort of legal advise whether we are able to do that. So that is something we probably have to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's going to be for a couple of matters as we step through all the options. That is going to be something we need to consider, is just how much influence the LAP can actually have, like what is it supposed to or allowed to cover, because it is limited in that respect as well. So we just have to be careful, how far we extend those powers. But we'll step through that as we go through the options.
And then it was highlighted that there was an incident with a special licence holder at the field days that underage people were served alcohol. And obviously there would have been sanctions imposed at the time. But is there anything that reviews the operation, like the issue of that licence in the future, so that if it's the same business that wanted to have a special licence at the field days next year, would they have to either demonstrate that they were really under better control with making sure people were over 18 before they were served? Or could you say, well, no, I'm not going to issue you a license because you weren't able to follow the rules?
So what occurred previously was the licensing committee convened a hearing to consider applications for anyone who had failed a control purchase operation previously. So they had to demonstrate that they had all necessary controls in place to prevent that. And if they didn't demonstrate that, their application would have been refused. So that was the process they put in place then.
Do we keep data on those that breach?
Yeah, I think those who come across enforcement is a greater scrutiny to application. And when we look at the criteria of the license, DLC are able to impose greater actually controls with or without lab, but then it's evidence-based. So what this policy gives us is actually a greater control in terms of, because you have decided that has to be, and it has to be. An example is a one-way door policy we're trying to actually recommend is there's a migration of patrons in the pubs and stuff, and that causes a lot of issues. So if we don't have evidence, we actually are not able to impose it. But if we have a policy that it should be, a certain time frame that it should be imposed, and it just becomes a control. Then it doesn't have to be conditioned. It's actually a policy they have to do. Yeah.
One final point about sensitive facilities, and that, like, at the moment, there's a proposal to have, I suppose, community parole officers being possibly set up by corrections. Would they be officers? So I guess they are frequented, by recently released prisoners or people on parole. Like, would you consider that to be a sensitive facility?
We did include a community facility as one of that. We haven't come up with a definition. I think it also says rehabilitation treatment center, because we had come across actually an off license where they deal with alcohol harm, people who have been abused with alcohol. Yeah, and they would like to either leave alcohol or they have been subject to, some form of harm. They were not able to oppose before, because they were not considered a sensitive side. But I think, we have actually included, but there is something we can elaborate a little bit further in the policy, how we do that.
I had a close look, a read of that rehabilitation centre, but I thought it doesn't, if you've got people on parole that doesn't actually have any issues with alcohol specifically, but I just thought it'd be worthwhile considering. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Mike.
Could I have another point of clarification?
Mike first, then you, Roger.
Thank you.
Yeah, just really a point just on Claire's point about those sensitive places and back to that preschool thing through the chair. I'd be really concerned if I was a business setting up a off license and then I had to change the way I operated because a preschool or something like that caused through this policy for me to have to change the way I operate my business and effectively put it at risk. So just a note, really.
Thanks, Mike. Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Just again, looking at the sensitive sites, I see the definition of marae. Will that, and we're trying to encourage the establishment of more papakainga, would that definition include papakainga?
We are, still very much at the high level, so we can definitely look into that when we get to the set definitions included in the draft. So if that's something, that you want looking at, we can definitely do that.
Well, it needs clarification. Yeah.
Tell Marie.
I'm not sure about that, Roger. That would be like asking a cluster of retirement homes, if they're sensitive.
Yeah, I would be of a similar opinion to you, Dale. But I just think that definition that's there, then papakainga would probably fall into it because it is a social purpose and sleeping spaces to educational facilities. So picking the words of definition out of there, that could apply to papakainga, but I'm not too sure that would be relevant. That's the same as saying another residential area of any other ethnic origin would apply in a similar fashion, which I don't think it should. Yep.
Appreciate
it just needs clarification.
Appreciate the sentiment, but we will get into the nitty-gritty of it a bit later. So definitely look into the definitions later, but for the purposes of today, we'll just park that for now.
Cool. Excellent.
One of the other concerns that I've got is a general concern about the growth that Cambridge is going through, and we're looking at possibly close to 80% or a doubling increase in population. And if we were to impose a cap, then that might restrict either the service provided to the new residential areas. And I'm wondering whether a cap related to population, so a number of establishments per 1,000 or 10,000 population, may be a different way of doing it that would still put some limitation on it, but enable growth to take place and still have the facility of the increase in services to an additional level of population.
Yeah, great suggestion. We'll take that and we'll come back to it just in a little couple of slides time when we talk about that specifically, and then maybe our guests can also provide their reasons for why they suggested what they did. So we'll come back to that point. Hold on to it just a little bit longer.
Yep.
Any other questions, or can we move through the options? Awesome. So when our slides come back up, excellent, thank you. Yeah, so from here, staff are recommending that we keep the policy and that it is reviewed, because as you saw from evidence provided, it might not be entirely fit for purpose currently. So keep the policy and also review it with changes, which means that we continue this process. But there are an awful lot of options. So what we're going to step through in the next bit is what's on the slides is definitely just a summary of what has been suggested. So there is a lot more to the points. It's just to help us keep on track. So if you have any specific questions or if you have any direction you want to provide as to what appeals, yeah, let us know. But yeah, like I said before, the LAP is, there's only certain areas it has control over. So the first one of these is location of licensed premises by reference to broad areas. So broad areas include things that can be defined. So perhaps areas that are laid out in the district plan, so zones or town boundaries, liquor licensing, liquor ban areas, so definable areas. So for this one, currently what is happening is the zones where commercial activities are permitted unless authorised by resource consent and subject to corresponding parts of the LAP. So that's where licensed premises can be currently located. And then it's been suggested for off licenses that we've got a couple of options. So, and remember, there are more options than what's just on the slide. So this is just a couple of recommendations that you could consider. So cap the number of off license per town at the current number, or apply any restrictions to off licenses with a cap outside of the alcohol ban areas. So yeah, also bringing in those alcohol ban areas, which just to keep in the back of your mind, that's a separate piece of bylaw there. So it'll bring that closer together with the local alcohol policy. Does anyone want to comment?
So again, can I have a point of clarification? An off license not only includes like the Liquor Kings and those standalone off licenses, but also the convenience dairies that perhaps sell liquor. They require off license as well. There's a question. Do they require off licenses as well? That's convenience dairies.
Is that only grocery stores? Do you mean the Fresh Choice and the super value type premises?
Yeah, the type of dairies that we've got, Swain Road opposite Joe's Garage, and Kelly Road the food barn that's there? They
So,
both sell liquor
yeah, dairies.
as an off license.
Yeah, so they're considered grocery stores under the legislation. Dairies aren't, they are prohibited from holding an off license now under this act.
Right, okay.
helps.
So that doesn't, if we cap the number of off licenses, that wouldn't limit the establishment of new convenience dairies that actually sold beer, wine and beer and wine.
Supermarkets or grocery stores? No.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Oh,
thanks.
Under MOH, sorry, recommendations, we would include them. Sorry, apologies.
Sorry, you would include them?
They would be included under that.
Yeah, so all of those premises hold an off license, so they would be all covered by that.
Yes. So if we cap the number of off licenses at the current number, then any new convenience dairy that was set up, say in C2 or C3, C1, wouldn't be able to sell liquor.
I think from the inspector's submission, if you have a look at it, we're trying to put a cap only in the alcohol ban areas. And alcohol ban areas, I think just for your information, we have been deferred to actually MOH position because we feel the CBD actually already has a lot more actually off licenses. So our submission is basically only restricting those that's already there in towns, which is the likes of Kiki Town, they have alcohol ban area, Tiamutu has, actually Cambridge has, and that policies, I think it's subject to review also. It could be extended, but at the time of the policy, what we're suggesting is just we restrict that. And the outside those areas, there is actually no restriction. What we're suggesting is there is a greater tools provided to be able to make an assessment and location. Yeah, I think we did sort of thought about is what's the best tool we can come up with in terms of putting a restriction. You could do it by distance, you know, you could do it by the types of premises, or you could actually you put just a cap by population. But I think this area is growing, so we do need to be, I think, open-minded. The development is allowed, such as those grocery stores. But if it's a position of council, they don't like to have more alcohol in the area, that it can certainly be this case if that's what you wish to have in the policy. But I think what we consider is just putting a cap in the CBD only of those alcohol ban areas, and outside just increase the the distance, include the sensitive site, and DLC still can actually explore issuing it case by case basis. The bottom line is anybody selling cheap alcohol is a problem. It's not supermarket versus bottle store. And that's probably what has actually come up in the review of this Alcohol Act. So supermarkets probably seem to be the major seller and major contributor of alcohol harm. So just wanted to put you out there.
Lo, did you want?
You actually touched very much on what I was going to say. The largest off license in our town would be the 3 supermarkets. You've got to admit that they actually operate outside our restricted hours. They actually are challenging that in the courts. What I'm asking, do you expect in the future that we follow overseas examples where supermarkets are unable to sell alcohol? This is a policy in Australia, it's a policy in other areas, and you have to go to an actual set off license. So I'm just wondering whether that policy has ever been considered or thought about in this country at all.
When they did the review of this legislation, they did look at Victoria and other states in Australia to see. So it was considered when this act was, the bill went through Parliament and then was passed as this act.
But it is out of scope of the policy.
Liz.
Certainly there is a possibility in future, but it just depends on the government and the harm they see. I think just 2 weeks ago, we saw a commentary by police. Alcohol and drugs is the major contributor of their business. If they don't exist, police probably don't exist. So yeah, I think more of those things might change in the law. I don't know.
Liz and then Claire, did you want to?
Yeah, look, just as a bit of a direction to keep this moving forward, I'm mindful of time. I would like to personally look at capping, so look at the possible options within the CBD. So I appreciate that the growth is outside of this. So I would like to take a look at that as an option. And if I'm allowed to move on to the next one, which is the on licenses. Probably not as excited by that. Cafes, restaurants. I kind of feel like I want to keep that as it is, but look, happy to talk through that.
And I would also support that option B about restrictions to off licenses within that alcohol ban area, but outside just restrict. So go through that process. Yeah. Oh, sorry, cap and restrict. Yeah. I was going to check about that comment about it would be out of scope to remove alcohol sales from supermarkets. But if we had a community survey where that sentiment came through, would that give us the mandate to consider it, or would it still have to be at central government level?
I really wish Diana was here, but I believe that'll be out of scope because you'd be targeting a specific type of activity rather than a license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, she is. Oh, hi, I can't see you. Yeah. So yeah, just to clarify, the recommendations were only for off licenses, so only places where you can buy alcohol and then drink it somewhere else, not necessarily on licenses. Is that correct?
Yeah, is it okay if I just, so
Yep.
our recommendation was no new off license for a bottle store be issued within 1 kilometre of an existing off license. So that's where the supermarket grocery store part would come in, and setting a cap on off licenses for certain towns. So Te Awamutu, Cambridge, Leamington, Kiki. So that was our recommendation. Yeah. And that was based on some of the alcohol harm related data we already have. So although population is one thing that could be considered for us, alcohol-related harm and evidence of alcohol-related harm in our healthcare system is more of a stronger motivator.
Philip, and then Mike.
Thank you. In the UK, they restrict the supermarkets from selling alcohol and fence off those areas at certain times of day, and particularly certain days of the week, like a Sunday. Are we able to do?
That's again out of the scope. What would maybe happen is if we said that you could only operate, you could only have a license that is shorter than your supermarket hours, then they could maybe fence off. I believe they actually have to design the supermarket so that you can fence it off, but we can't stop them from, we can't do that.
We certainly can control hours, not the days. Yeah, we can control the hours, not the days. So this is something that's achievable only through hours.
I think it's the mornings over there and Sundays. Sundays up to a certain time in the morning, and then it's open to buy alcohol.
So yes, we can certainly look at those hours on a particular day as well. Yes.
Showing my age here, but I remember when they used to fence off that area on a Sunday. Yeah.
Just a note, so in the UK, that's because there's spirits inside those supermarkets. So this is, I don't think that conversation is one that we're not talking about the same thing in comparison.
Yeah.
So spirits is a whole different sector, right? And we don't have spirits in our supermarket, so I don't think it's quite the same.
Okay. So you've got the steer in terms of that one. Moving on then to the next slide, and of course Liz jumped the gun then, but away you go, Mika.
So yeah, just to clarify, so the next thing that it has control over is the proximity to premises of a particular kind or kinds, and this can be interpreted as off license next to an off license, or on license versus off license. Yeah, so the premises is the licensed premises. That's what we're talking about here. It's a little bit confusing. So not sensitive sites, just the licensed premises. And yeah, so we have so currently the District Licensing Committee only has regard to the proximity of these licenses. So it's something they have to consider when they are giving a license or not. And so it's been recommended that a radius is set around a license, and I think there's two different opinions on how big that radius should be. Yeah, and this is generally from off licenses to other off licenses. Anything to add there?
Can I ask for a clarification?
There you go, Roger.
The possible option A, no new licensed premises within a set radius from existing licensed premises for on and off licenses. My interpretation is that a restaurant license is an on license.
Right.
Would the adoption of that clause mean that you couldn't have two adjacent restaurants that were licensed?
Yeah, that's an accurate analysis of it. Yeah, to my mind.
Oh,
Yeah,
I can also see inhibiting like new hotels or accommodation and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I just think heading in a direction that would cause us all sorts of grief going forward.
yeah, I don't think that's
Yeah.
where we want to go.
I couldn't support that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so ignore on and focus off licenses. Any opinions?
Mike.
I guess it's probably right for now, but I'm just thinking of, what's it called, the Black Barn? What's that? That place opposite Rest Haven, that new supermarket, the Wall Shed, right, sorry. Over time, that C2 development is going to be massive. Like, it's going to be its own community. And your radius thing, I'm into radius is as the crow flies, it's not as the streets are, you drive. I just see potential issue there too, in that down the track, there could be some shopping complex in there when it gets up to, a couple of thousand houses in there in time to come. Just considering that down the track, it'll probably won't happen quick enough that it's going to be reviewed in that time, but just something to be aware of. I'm just thinking those big subdivisions.
I know it's not.
So that's.
Where are you going, Nicole?
Go on.
I know it's not in your area, but it is very close to that. Tamaheri had a bottle store off license apply to go very close to the grocery store that's there. I don't know if that's the sort of community you're sort of thinking maybe may occur in C2 in the future, but their lap has the 1K and that prevented that bottle store from going in next to that grocery store.
I think it's inspector's view that we don't support any restriction on one premises to another of safe kind. The only restriction we actually advocating is for off licenses, but even that is not a restriction, but ability to consider more.
Roger, did you have something to add?
It's just that I think that the 500-meter radius may be too restricted for the convenience type dairy, particularly in our new subdivisions.
Just want to clarify, dairy shops can't have a liquor license, it's a grocery store. So 500 distance is just to consider the impact, not putting a restriction on locations. So it's basically, it gives the agencies and inspectors to be able to comment on impacts. And one of the reasons we sort of thought was is, there's some case laws you can consider up to 1 kilometer as an objector, you can do that. But it just gives us certainty actually, if somebody is within the area that we would like to consider the effects on, we can. So it's DLC still has the ultimate probably goal to issue or decline. So it's not a restriction.
So it becomes subjective.
I'm just picking up on what Anisha said. It's not a blanket or sort of inflexible restriction. You can take an assessment, and so if you felt it was justified or that the impacts wouldn't be so large that it could be accommodated, so it's not a ban. I guess that's what you're saying, because I'm definitely concerned about the density of liquor outlets. And so while I appreciate we've got to have other considerations, I would support at least the 500-meter radius with an assessment, and so exceptions where necessary.
Yeah, no.
We've actually got that situation right here in Te Awamutu today. Albert Park is an restricted zone, all right, and you've got 2 liquor outlets right up onto the roundabout. So you've got Superlick and that there. So they're 500 metres away, and that's certainly close enough. I mean, we wouldn't want them any closer. And, you know, you've got to remember that the restricted zone we're talking to has a large proportion of junior people playing sport there. And we do not want alcohol retailers, particularly off licenses, sitting outside the gate. So I think anything about convenience, 500 metres is only a reasonable walk. And I think it's bad enough as it is. Let's not change it.
Just through the chair, I'm conscious that we've gone over time.
Yeah.
Would you like me to briefly continue or?
I see that there are 7 more slides that you're obviously wanting a bit of a steer on.
There is an option for coming back for another workshop if.
I feel like I would like that. I think
so.
So much information in here, and it's so important to our community. I think I would like another.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, it's a big
Another
piece
session.
of work and crucial
Yeah,
that we
I'd
get
support
it
that.
right.
We might just not
Yep.
have our lovely
Yeah.
experts, so
Yeah,
perhaps giving them a final say on just really quick on the last couple of points.
Yes, if you could, that would be great, because I think we owe it to our communities to do this really comprehensive, and I feel like rushing over the last 7 is probably not going to do it justice. You've provided us with some fabulous information in your reports, which we'll obviously refer back to again when we meet and go over this. But if there's any further closing comments either of you want to leave us with, I'd really appreciate to hear them from you.
I think I'm happy to come back and clarify because it's very important for our district in our future. Because what we are doing is we are planning for future. What it holds for us is we don't know, but this actually provides a safeguard for us. So my team would be always here. I think the only thing I would just suggest is we need to have one policy, just not different policy or overlays. Yes, Auckland Council have a policy overlays for controlling premises by area. But then if you do for certain businesses like off license, you're putting a restriction of no off license in Kiki, then no off licenses to be sort of by certain time, then people can still travel to another district to buy it. So you would like to have a same policy overlay for the whole district, given the distance and proximity to traveling time. Yeah. So yeah, happy to come back.
Thanks, Anesh and Nicole.
Thank you for your time. No, I don't want to add too much more. It's really good to see the thoughts that are coming out of this council. You've done really well with your previous lap, so it'd be really good to improve on that and keep your community happy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your really considered report. I think, Mika? Oh, you want to, okay, last slide, just
Very
quickly.
last one.
Excellent. No, because we will revisit this in a greater.
Yeah, it's more just a update rather than anything. Just if you do have any thoughts, feelings, the things we are investigating, no firm anything has been done with this. Considering having a collaborate process with Otorohanga District Council, because they are also going through the same process. This is something that we've done in the past. It has its pros and its cons, but something to consider. If you have any questions about that, please reach out. And then similar with the bylaw. So our bylaw is not due for review till 2025, but both very similar, especially if we go down the route of possibly, not saying we are, but if we consider the alcohol bylaw areas as part of the LAP, definitely something we need to consider. So it's just another option of, doing the review in a way that really allows the community to participate easily, going out, talking about the same thing. So any thoughts about that also be appreciated.
I was supportive of both of those, actually.
Yeah.
It made sense to me.
Unless
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, find another time to come to see us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we'll break for lunch and return. Gosh, my eyes are terrible. 1:15. Make it 1:20. Can we?
Excuse me.
Give me the thumbs up, Zoe, when you're all good to go. Welcome back, Roger. What time is, thank you, Zoe. What time is it, Roger?
It's currently 29 minutes past 1.
In the morning, so it's exactly okay.
Oh,
You're doing
yes,
very
good
well.
morning. Yes.
Doing very well. Right, so we shall rip into our next workshop then about Ahuaki. Vanessa, the world traveller, take it away.
Kia ora,
Tweedledum
everyone.
and Tweedledee, quiet.
I'm going to start speaking French in a second, if it doesn't go. Kia ora, everyone. As I was saying to Kirsty, first time we are providing an update in 15 minutes, so that's going to be quite challenging. This is really a project update. It's been quite a while since we've seen you and update you on the progress of Ahuaki. As you know, we are progressing quite fast towards the Work Cafe workshop. So this is actually a good opportunity to kind of let you know what we've been up to. As a background on the last SPNP was actually on the 27th of April, where we looked at PCG recommendation and following up by the special planning, strategic planning and policy committee meeting to approve a community participatory process in the form and shape of a word cafe. So we had actually proposed 3 options and assessed actually the pros and cons on this. And since then, we have been planning around this particular community engagement. We have also reviewed and addressed the 2,000 plus feedback that we had received during the roadshow back in February and March. So it has taken actually quite a while, but quite an in-depth analysis of how each of those feedbacks coming from Mana Whenua, from the stakeholders and from the community as a whole will be addressing some changes in the interim draft plan, the future scenario, which was actually put for consultation during that period of time. We have also looked into the implementation and operationalization of Ahuaki. That's a mouthful, and that's also a big piece of work. This is mainly done actually internally. So at the moment, we're really trying to understand what current processes, system, and roles do we have already in place within our organization, which could support the delivery of Ahuaki as a portfolio. And then we also have obviously the Work Cafe workshop planning, which is imminent now to be delivered over the next couple of months. So as a reminder, and the update is really focusing on this today because that's pretty much the primary kind of piece of work that we're delivering at the moment. Just as a reminder, Word Cafe is really a type of focus group workshop, which helps to address high-level questions and get actually a bit of sense of through a layering of discussion, if I should say, and that will be used. That kind of format will be used for the second round of community engagement, and should be delivered by the start of November. We have started to recruit and I've opened actually application for expression of interest. This was open on the 26th of July. This will be open for a 4 weeks period, so closing by the 23rd of August. The idea is to recruit 40 to 45 people, residents, local residents who are living within Waipa, which would represent the community that we are expecting to have by 2050. So we've done a little bit of work from a statistical perspective, from a projection perspective, to understand how many of certain age group, how many of certain part of ethnicity, location should actually be part of those 40 to 45 people. So we've got 2 sets of criteria. The first set of criteria, so we are, just as an update this morning, we had just under 50 online submission, and we've got an extra 10 on hard copy surveys. We are doing more and more kind of targeting engagement with schools, newsletter, Facebook one yesterday. We sent out the community and stakeholder newsletter this morning. We are talking to each of our stakeholders as well, so that we can actually use their own kind of communication channels as well to advertise of the Word Cafe expression of interest application. And once we receive actually all those applications by the end of the 23rd of August, we will be looking at shortlisting those expression and interest first by ethnicity, age, and location. And if we can, actually, if we need to refine a little bit more of this group of 40, 45 people, we would use actually employment industry and status of house income and house ownership. There is also a level of looking at some minority kind of groups, the disabled community, and ensuring that we have actually representation there as well. It's not always something which is statistically projected for the 2050, but that's something that we need to, that is a proportion of our community that we want to have in the group of 40 and 45 people there. We will send you some bullet points as to how we are signing up people online, but also where the hard copies are, so that you can use your own communication channel to advertise this within your communities. That would be fantastic if you could do this for us as well. As I said, this will be closing on the 23rd of August. So just a couple of weeks until we close this. The setup of those workshop, really high level update here. We will have 4 workshops over a 2-month period. The first workshop will be an onboarding workshop where we would actually welcome all participants and kind of establish the rules and principles of the debate and what will be debated on during the Word Cafe. The second and third workshops will be the Word Cafe itself. So a session of 4 hours and another session of online of 2 hours. And then we will have the 4th workshop, which will be a recommendation presentation workshop, where we are welcoming all elected members to receive the recommendation, which will have been actually discussed by those members of a community, elected members to actually appear as observers only on that stage, to actually listen to those groups and their own recommendation and how they can be enacted in the future scenario. The topic at this stage are really looking, and that's on the back of analyzing those 2,000 plus pieces of feedback. We're looking at discussing community identity and character. That's something that has actually come through quite strongly through the feedback. How do we intensify and retain actually the character of our villages and our towns? It will be also about economic development, noting that it's the first time that we will be actually interacting with the community on that particular topic. How do we actually boost the economy of Waipa, boosting the rural and urban economy of Waipa? We will also look at park and public facilities, particularly looking at community halls and how do we actually optimize those facilities, as well as the heritage art and culture, and how do we actually have some cultural visibility, or how do we increase participation within our communities from a community perspective. Yeah, that's about it. A good 50 minutes update. And yeah, if you open, I will start talking. And yeah.
Any questions from Vanessa?
Yeah.
No?
How's the response been to the applications for the World Cafe? It's been open for a week or two.
Yeah, it's been on for 2 weeks. So far, as I said, 50 online submissions and an extra 10 on paper copies that we still need to kind of enter. Now, as I said, Facebook advertisement have gone out yesterday, and we got pretty much a push by 10 overnight. So we're intending for this to kind of increase. We are emailing all the schools and all the places that we have actually visited in the first round of engagement, so all those organization group, so that we can use their newsletter as well. So they've been in communication. We've been in communication with them over the last kind of couple of weeks, but we're now providing the level of detail, and we're really trying to monitor what type of diversity we're getting through those online as well. So every Monday and Thursdays, we're pretty much reviewing the group composition of those application to know what kind of more targeting engagement we need to do. So let's say if we are missing on 16 to 18 years old, we know that we need to actually go to the school again and push for engagement there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry, that was a dumb question. But no, you put me off by saying you'd had 50 submissions. I thought you meant, yeah, something else.
Cool. No other questions? No? Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, team. Next workshop then is significance and engagement policy, scoping approach. Melissa, who I think I saw online floating around somewhere there, and Cheryl. Just Melissa? Excellent. Hello, hello, Melissa.
Hello, sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen.
We can see you and we can hear you, so take it away.
Can you guys see that all right?
Yes, we can.
Cool, awesome. So yes, the purpose of this policy is to really seek some feedback on the timing of the significance and engagement policy review. So the purpose of the policy is really to provide a consistent or to provide consistency and to manage expectations when it comes to when and how council will engage the public on particular matters. So the policy really provides for criteria and sets out the approach in terms of how and when we do consultation. So although there is a requirement to have a significance and engagement policy, there is no set timeframes as to when the policy must be reviewed by. Some other policies and legislation state that they must be reviewed every 5 or 6 years, for example. This policy doesn't have any set review timeframes around it, but as good practice, it is good to review it as part of the long-term plan process. or at least do a bit of a check-in. And as you see there, it was reviewed as part of the last or the current long-term plan. The assessment that we have done to date, we feel that the policy is largely fit for purpose. It could do with some very minor tweaks, and the details of these tweaks are included in the memo that was circulated for this presentation. So the options for this review, we could do it now and consult as part of the formal consultation period in March, April next year. Or the alternative is we could delay or defer the review until the affordable waters transition has gone through. The reason for that being the policy as it currently stands talks about or it includes financial thresholds. So and it talks about percentages of capital expenditure and operating expenditure. So obviously a significant portion of council's business being Three Waters, it really kind of skews what those percentages look like in terms of when the policy might require us to consult. So there might be some unintended consequences as a result of that. So I guess what I'm saying is, regardless, we really do need to review the policy around the transition period for waters. But I guess the question is really, do elected members want us to do that light touch now, or are they happy to defer everything for another probably 18 months or 2 years? And again, that's just really the point that I'm seeking clarification on today. So I can't see anyone.
No, that's okay, Melissa. I'll open the floor for questions then. I think Monty's got a comment to make or an observation.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa.
And then you, Roger, yeah.
Just in your report, Melissa, you're talking about the International Association for Public Participation, that our current engagement policy isn't necessarily in alignment with that. Can you give us a brief flavour of where we diverge?
So it uses sorry, you're talking about the, did you say the International Association of Public
Yes.
Participation?
Yeah,
Yes.
you reference it in your report.
Yeah. So the policy does make specific reference to the IAP2 spectrum, so that the spectrum really goes from informing through to, through involving up to empowering. The problem with that is it does create a bit of a perception that the higher the significance of an issue, the higher up the spectrum the consultation or the engagement should take place. So, high significance of an issue would lead us to more that engagement at that empowerment spectrum. But in practice, it doesn't always work like that. Take, I guess, for example, a bylaw review, say dogs, high public interest, we're required to review it by legislation. I guess we're not really, yes, we're doing a very comprehensive engagement campaign, but it's not really at that empowerment level. So that's where the two aren't really aligning. And I think we'll start to see more and more councils sort of start to move away from that IAP2 spectrum, or at least not take such a hard line on it.
Mm-hmm.
When you say empowerment, do you mean like community participation in decision making? Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah. It is really at the upper level. So I guess an example of empowerment, it's not something we use a lot, but an example would be around local government elections. You're really putting the public in full control of the decision. So yeah, it's not something we do a lot of, but it does happen.
Roger, then Lou.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Thanks, Melissa. Yes, had a look at the memo and the considerations that you identified there. If I think back to the last LTP consultation that we did on this policy, the response that we had from our community was very close to minimal, if not zero. I can't remember any major submission that we had on the policy. And looking at the application of the policy throughout the last 3 years, I think we've not found any instance where it hasn't guided us appropriately in whether or not we went out for further consultation or not. I see your recommendation. I think that obviously when the Three Waters, if the Three Waters goes through, and of course we won't know that really until October as to what any government stance is, I think we should wait at least until then, because if it happens, it'll be a major review of that policy, and I don't think that any tweaking really is necessary up until that point. So I certainly support the recommendation you've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Anyone else? Monty's giving it the thumbs up, Lou.
Yeah, thank you. I actually concur with Councillor Gordon. I feel that the Three Waters is not the only issue that we're dealing with here. The Local Government Act will be another act that, whether it's adopted or not, will be interesting. We're also looking at the Resource Management Act, which is called the Natural and Built Act now, and it actually has a second part that has not even been, or third part that hasn't even been written yet. That is compliance for climate change. All of these issues we're going to have to deal with. And I do honestly feel that we need to allow, as Councillor Gordon stated, until October, so that we can make it an advised decision. I think that, see what we're actually facing in that issue. I do agree that possibly the policy needs some tweaks. However, in saying that, I think it's worked reasonably well to date. So I don't think we've had too many problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Anyone else? There seems to be a general comfort with the recommendation that you have there in terms of deferring until 20.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Right. 10 minutes ahead. Look at us go. George, take the hot seat. It's our final workshop for the day, is the Residents' Perception Annual Report. No. Nice to see you, George. The floor is yours.
All right, so obviously you've received the full report, but I did want to just highlight a few points to you and just a little bit more background and context and really think about looking forward. The full report will go up onto Council's website at the end of this workshop, so it'll be publicly available. So if I just whip through, I just did want to quickly touch on methodology. So we've now got some quite good longitudinal trends. This is our 7th year. It is designed to be representative of the community. So it's randomly selected from the electoral roll, and it has about a 25% response rate in terms of the invitations to participate, which is good. Just to keep in mind that it is one avenue of feedback. We have multiple ways that we collect information in council. This is one of them, and it needs to also be considered in light of that other feedback that we do get. But I would say perceptions do matter. They do influence public trust and how they engage with us. It's a mixture of postal and online, and it's designed to try to be as unbiased as possible.
We are awaiting a benchmark report, so that is due mid-September. We will get a bit more of a flavour of where we sit against a cohort of other councils, but that won't be available yet for some time. Probably just when reading the report, it's really good to think about the external environment and what might be influencing perceptions, and that's just a flavour of what's been happening. I'll just probably highlight also, I think, the one that we have up there in terms of weather events. So our district has been impacted by weather. We've had a really wet summer, and that potentially may be influencing the results as well. So just keeping that in mind. Key themes. So I won't go into any of the results in detail. You've obviously got the report, but I did just want to highlight some of the key headlines, I guess. Overall, there has been a decline against a number of the metrics and overall performance. And when you sort of have a bit more of a look at it, there are some concerns around, I guess, the impact of growth and change within the district, and the longer term residents, those that have been residing in the district, feel, I guess, more uncomfortable about that than other cohorts. There is a movement from champions to skeptics. It's been a bit of a swing. If we have a look at the verbatims, where we can delve a little bit deeper into there, so probably some unsurprising results in terms of concern with waste and recycling, very much dominant. A lot of comments about transportation and the desire for that to be prioritised. There's a tension between rural and urban value for money. Now that's an ongoing conversation around services between different areas of the district, and knowledge of council remains low. But on the flip side, however, there's still some positive things to take out of the survey. So reputation still does remain within an acceptable range. The majority of residents are still proud to live in the district. 53% of residents rate Waipa 8 to 10 for this question. So that's a majority. The quality of life is still considered high. And I would say, there are a lot of great comments about council too that are coming through the report, and that's really, really positive to see. But I guess the key thing here is looking forward, and the little bit around the so what, I guess. And when you actually do have a look at the forward plan, you do have to sort of say there is a lot of alignment with some of the results in here with known areas. So for example, recycling, the Cambridge Connections project will be looking to address some of the, transportation questions. And there is significant investment within the 23-24 annual plan when you look at the investment that will be made and for the likes of, cycleways, etc. Probably consideration of roading investment levels might need to be discussion through the LTP process. And we are already looking at many of these areas, so strengthening our communication and engagement. There are a number of strategies being developed, a significant digital investment, and those conversations around council embedding as an anchor institution. So looking forward, there is alignment. There are probably a couple of conversations that need to be had around a couple of areas, but that probably sums it up. So next steps, I haven't gone into that in detail. You can all have a read of the report, but it will be available on Council's website today. The inclusion will be included in Council's annual report. So a number of these satisfaction measures do relate to levels of service. So you will see these results within the annual report. And again, I'll just say the benchmark report is due mid-September. So that's really my introduction to allow you time for questions and discussion.
Great, thanks, George. Look, it's probably been no surprise that we're a bit gutted, but disappointed, but in the same breath, not at all surprised. I don't think there was anything new there for a lot of us. After last election, obviously, we took the opportunity to sort of harvest a lot of the feedback that we'd all received individually in the previous weeks or so, and yeah, that was it, right? So look, the 3 R's, as far as I can see, roading, recycling, and rubbish, bear out really clear, and in an overwhelming majority of the themes that have borne through, I think, we have to look at it both in the context nationally, but then also moving away from the negatives, look at what we're actually doing, what's our response. And I think for the most part, we have responded and are responding to these as best we can in this environment. So look, I'll open the floor. There was one thing that did really kind of, one of the things that really kind of personally jarred a bit with me was the increased levels of high levels of distrust from younger people with our organisation. That was probably a personal thing for me, and that's a on the to-do list, must do better sort of space as we've discussed in the past. So look, I'll open the floor for comments and see what other members think. Monty.
Yeah, when I read this, I sort of had two comments straight up. First, probably to you, Gary. I straight away started worrying about the staff, right? That, you know, your staff are going to get this, and it's potentially demoralising to see those sort of trends. So I imagine you're thinking about that quite a lot, and whether you want to have a comment on that was my first point. And the second one, straight after you, what you've just been saying, Susan, is sort of accept the challenge. So what are we going to do about it? And I think there's, you know, that it can frame up the long-term plan quite nicely. Okay, this is what we're seeing. This is how we're responding in the LTP, and a comms plan that aligns with that. So take it as a challenge, not a negative. So it doesn't personally worry me. The young people got to you. The one that got to me was that the effective financial management. I was like, oh, that hurts. So it's the things that we're particularly interested in. But, Gary, what do you think about the staff?
Before Gary answers that, of course, there is a section there where Maunga Tautari ward rates very highly in terms of leadership. Just want to point that out, Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, staff look at the results quite closely and always looking at ways of doing things better. But it strikes me that the three areas where we know we need to do better in refuse, recycling and roads, they are things that touch on every ratepayer. And so that will have an impact of every ratepayer's perception on the council performance. I am interested to see the benchmark results to see whether this is a trend that aligns with all other councils, and anecdotally that's probably likely. But critically, I think we need to understand, you know, within the context is that these are services where we know we need to do better. They impact on all ratepayers. And so that's a conversation we're going to have with the ratepayers through this LTP.
Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. I guess, yeah, this is all context, and until we get the benchmarking, we don't really know how we're moving in relation to others. But having said that, we do have to take on board that the perception we're getting from this survey, you know, from our ratepayers or from our residents, is their reality. And if we can, we do need to address that. As you know, you've both been saying, what do we do about it? And look, this is not a direct thing at all, but it just made me think way back in my business. We had a customer bought a lounge suite, spent quite a lot of money on it, and there was some kind of fault in it. I don't remember what, but yes, we'll arrange to, you know, pick it up, transport it back to the factory, have it remedied and whatever. And this was not a quick process. We did the best we could, but time went by, and you know, this customer rang on 2 or 3 occasions with, you know, quite decent gaps in between, weeks, really getting irate about it. And I sat down with my team, and you know, they said we couldn't hurry it up. There was some, you know, had to get fabric from overseas. God, you know, it was just but I said, look, what we can do is keep in constant contact. Talk to the factory, and so someone took on board that they're going to do this every week. Now, nothing changed in terms of the time of delivery, but from this person's perspective, we hadn't forgotten her. She came to realise that she was top of mind. It didn't speed anything up. It didn't change the reality of when she got her lounge suite fixed, but it changed her perception of our business quite substantially. Yeah, feel the love, I suppose, that's right. So, you know, like I say, I'm not trying to draw any direct things here, just that we need to look at where things are not going well in the perception of our participants in this thing, and see what we can do. That's realistic that we can do, you know, all that kind of thing. Yeah.
I've found, may I talk? I've found follow-up and communication with people is absolutely critical in anything, in any group, organisation, business, life, family, you know, whatever. It's absolutely
I'll just carry on for a second with that. When we talked about this at a staff meeting, I just got a lot of, oh no, this is going to go, no, we can't do that. It'll be, you know, we're just going back with nothing. How's that going to come out? But that's not what happened. It's just, but so like you say, I agree, Phil, just going back. We haven't forgotten you. We haven't done anything positive yet, but we haven't forgotten you. Yeah, I don't know.
Thanks, Andrew. Any other comments or questions? Dale Marie?
Quick one. That's what we call tikanga in good tikanga. So if we can implement that across the board, good tikanga is going to get us a long way. Yeah. And e mihi nui kia koe mo tō kōrero I tēnei rā.
Right, anybody else have any questions? Claire?
Yeah, thanks. Just covering off what I said this morning, really, because I don't know if George was here or not, but yeah, it is disappointing, but I felt some of the particular issues were responses to, I suppose, you know, the opportunities that were afforded us through funding from central government. I'm thinking of the urban mobility and that kind of thing, and the streets for people in particular. Given the specific comments about, what is it? Yeah, that's right, dots and cones and things. Because we did put a response in place once we could see what's happening there, you know, with this urban mobility committee that's got community representatives on it. And it'd be great if we could do some comms or messaging around how a number of those issues that come through, we've already action or made changes that would address some of those things. I must say, Mike, I also get a bit concerned about the lack of financial prudence or good management, because I do think that Waipa does a great job, and that really, again, I don't know if we're getting that message across. We've done some messaging about where people's rates money goes, but we've done nothing about the processes behind the scenes that are pretty stringent, and I guess, you know, really working at making sure the money we spent has to be spent, or it's well spent. I love the initiatives we've got about local suppliers and you know, local content and that, which I don't know if our general ratepayers know about that. You know, I think there were a lot of cost saving analysis done, you know, with the annual plan. Gary, you were telling me about allocating accountants to each different business unit and going line by line and asking those hard questions. And like, those are really good practices, but you know, our ratepayers never hear that kind of story. Yeah, I don't know whether or not it would be possible to have some of that work given a wider audience, given that we've already got heaps that is going out and stuff like that. Like, would people be interested in that? But there was a consistent message quite often that we never hear what council's doing. We never get justifications for decisions, or that was a sort of a clue to me that people do want to know a bit more of the process that's gone on to arrive at a decision, or why we're confident that it's been well researched and it's a good investment, or we're not wasting money.
Yeah, where you go, Monty?
Just on this sort of communication stuff, and this is personal view, I'm no expert at all, recognising there's comms people in the room, but I always hate a comms plan that says, look how great we are. It just doesn't work for me. Whereas one that starts with, the perception is that we need to improve this, so this is what we're doing about it, that does resonate with me. I don't know if there's any science behind that, but the look how great we are, it just does not work for me.
Yeah, Gary.
So one of the things that's concerned me is that traditional statutory consultative processes don't land well with the public. You have 20 days within which to make a submission. We get a lot of submissions. We consider them all as one, and people will inevitably get a letter outlining our decision, 6 or 8 weeks later. And I think that tends to annoy people. So that's why with Ahuaki, we've really looked at how can we get out and get closer to the community and make this a journey rather than a strictly time constrained process. And this was all rolling out whilst the survey was being undertaken. But not being constrained by those statutory processes, I think would do a lot. And then closing the loop with the World Cafes, and actually then looking to engage the community in the implementation of those plans will, I think, be the sort of communication that will stand the council in really good stead. Can I just say, for context on the survey is rated on a scale of 1 to 10 for people. So to be satisfied, you've got to be giving the council an 8 to 10 mark, which is a pretty tall benchmark. And to be neutral, you're in the 5 to 7 mark. So overall, the satisfaction rating with council is 74% overall, rating the council 5 and above. And we've got 24% dissatisfied. That's marking between 1 and 4. And given the prevailing sort of economic circumstances, COVID, weather events, climate change, political environment in which we're working, I'd just say, just take this in context. It's a 12 months snapshot. And since COVID, until COVID, things were trending generally up. And since COVID, they've trended generally down. Now we know that our inputs remain essentially the same, but we also know that in respect of roads, the data will say that the roads are deteriorating due to climate, weather events, heavy traffic, those sorts of things. We know that recycling is a service that hasn't performed well because of the unavailability of truck drivers. And I think too, because of the cost of disposing waste, a lot of people are putting their waste in the recycling bin. And so those 3 things are related. And as I've said, they touch on every ratepayer. But overwhelmingly, people are rating council between 5 and 10 for 74% of the services.
And look, we've got to remember that. I think, look, I'm with Mike and Claire on the financial prudence one, because I know that, our finances here are handled really, really well from the financial reporting aspect and well, and how the money is spent. But I also recognise, democracy is a ham-fisted, clumsy way of running or anything really. You have lots of false starts and backups, and we'll have another go at this. And you look at the Cambridge pool, and look at any of the decent projects that go around to make our community what they are. They're not smooth running, well thought, that the process is and that is democracy. And people see, oh, gee, like, what are they doing? You know, spend a whole bunch of money on consultants doing this and that. And it's true, we do. It's just that the alternative forms of government seem to end up even worse. So, you know, be happy with what we've got, I guess. That's my message to people out there, but is anybody listening?
Classic. I take some comfort from the fact that residents newer to our district are infinitely more positive, which means that they have a sense of perspective from living elsewhere, and that's not to diminish or dismiss the obvious issues that have been raised in there, but I do take some comfort from that. And there was a great quote, I'm trying to find it from a verbatim thing, I can't, and it says something along the lines of, I may whinge about council, but they're the best damn one that I've had, or something like that. Like, I thought that was quite a cool, I mean, there's a healthy, robust sort of focus on us, but ultimately levels of satisfaction that I think we can be take some comfort from. And, you know, the desirability of the district speaks for itself, and the fact that there is that quality of life quotient there being really high. So yeah, there are definitely some positives to take out of it. Any other comments?
Yes,
anybody to make? Roger?
Yes, thank you, Susan. Yes, I looked at this, and at the end of the report there's 3 pages which gives each of the questions and the lateral series over the last 6 years. And I've got to admit that when I first read that, I suppose I was a little bit depressed, because I know that as a combined team, both around the council table and within all of the officer team, everybody works extremely hard to achieve a positive result wherever possible. But then I thought, well, if it's over 6 years, you've got to look at perhaps the apathy that we saw within the election, you know, where only 40% really decided that they had an interest and wanted to vote. And I started to think, well, if the majority of the people who responded to this survey the majority were within the 60% that actually had the apathy to start with, how can we give too much store into the possibility that that apathy has moved forward onto this perception survey? I think it does highlight some areas where we know there are challenges, and we know that we've got to put the focus in for the next LTP. And I think it's going to give us a very good steer for that. But the fact that, you know, you're looking at a level of, now in 2023, a lot of them in the teens, one questions, I mean, I don't think as a council, compared to other councils, we're that bad. I think we've done a lot of very, very good things over the last, what's now together, near enough all together, with the exception of a couple of new councillors that have joined us, but it's been pretty much a stable team. And we've achieved a lot over those 4 years. So I just question whether the tool and the structure of the tool is actually giving us a workable data set. So that's my thought on the matter.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Kind of point well made in terms of, you know, hard work over that period of time and feeling somewhat deflated, I guess. But I guess you just pick ourselves up, take it as a learning experience, and pull out the good stuff and work on the still to do's, I guess. And that's where that response sits, right? And we're pretty confident that we've got a lot of that underway already. Claire.
Just to clarify then, like, is there going to be an action plan from it? Like, we're waiting, you know, the benchmark report. But once we get that, like, I mean, I'd like to see us maybe identify some areas that we know we haven't maybe responded already, because I mentioned, like that urban mobility committee or something, but maybe there are areas that we say, well, yeah, we should really try and lift our performance. Like, will there be an action plan for some of the stuff, or are you just going to accept the feedback and say, well, we're just going to carry on working as we always have, and we'll try and improve. But I'd quite like to see some kind of action plan come out of it, particularly for maybe the areas that we identify where we don't really have either a response already, or it's emerging as an issue that's quite I suppose like relevant, timely. For instance, that the youth voice and things like that, Susan, like because I know that was covered at LGNZ's conference as well, wasn't it, about the future generations and things. And we have talked about having a youth panel. I learned at the hui I was at yesterday about the wellbeing economy that some other councils and regional councils do have youth panels, but we've sort of not done anything on it. Yeah.
So no, we have.
Yeah.
We have a report coming to us, and yeah, you'll recall we had some discussions earlier on about the former youth council and the youth awards, and the feeling, my feeling, and certainly it was backed by elected members, was that it wasn't really fit for purpose. It wasn't doing what we were wanting it to. So staff have gone away and interacted with young people off the back of the group we convened for the Ahuaki intervention or engagement, and have built on that, because my sense is, I'm a 51-year-old woman. What would I know how they want to talk with me? So my sense is we need to invite them to co-design how they want to interact with us. So yeah, so I'm waiting I'm actually, after this, I've got a progress update meeting with staff on that, with the intention for a proposal to come back to council to contemplate. The term that was used by Sophie Howe, the former Minister for Future Generations in Wales, was that we need to be better ancestors. So resonated quite strongly with a lot of us in the room, for obvious reasons. So yeah, that's definitely a work in progress.
Well, I guess it's great to hear that. I guess what I'm saying is it would be good to have a formal response planned once we get the benchmark report, to identify any areas that we do want to, have particular interventions, or at least, get something going to try and lift our performance in key areas. Obviously, the recycling roads and rubbish, but I don't just want to read it, deep sigh, and put it in the drawer, I guess.
So probably just to respond to that, so I can take guidance from your worship about what you'd like to see in that regard. I guess my comment in terms of an action plan, there's some clear aspects here that have been identified that do require conversations through the LTP process. So I guess that's where some of the gaps will come out. In terms of many of the other interventions, if you like, are in train and will be reported through a number of mechanisms, and obviously with the communication and engagement strategies being developed, this will also inform the content of those. So I could bring a collated view. I'm just would need direction on that in terms of the value that it would add when there's a multiple conversations going on.
Don't you think, George, we're already doing this with internal strategic priorities, chief executives' KPIs? I mean, that's exactly what that's about, trying to turn the dial on stuff. So this is a piece of evidence that informs that strategic direction. But I take your point, Claire. I don't want to decide and put it in the bottom drawer either. And I started this off by saying, it doesn't sort of personally offend me, this, but so what are we going to do about it? So I think we're all on the same page there. But I think we've already got what we need. I don't see any point, another report or another piece of work. We're doing it. It just informs what we're already doing, is my opinion. What do you think?
That from a staff recommendation point of view, that would be what I think as well.
So
you've all seen the internal sort of strategic priorities that staff have worked out, particularly around things like the better customer service strategy, communication strategy, continuous improvement, a closer working relationship with iwi. There's a whole, there's 23 or 24 sort of internal strategic priorities that we're working on. So yeah, let's just do a bit of a gap analysis. We know that we owe the community a conversation around the issues of, this is coming straight out of the survey of, roads. Are we putting enough resource into that? Recycling, can we do that better? And refuse disposal, is that something the council needs to step back in and manage? Because of course it's not part of our core business at the moment, but we think that's the issue that's giving rise to problems with recycling. So those are clearly issues we need to highlight through the LTP. So we'll just do a bit of a gap analysis and see if there's anything coming out of the survey that we haven't yet got in here. Yeah.
Perhaps through you, Mount there. Yeah, you've already designated Roger Gordon or Councillor Gordon and myself to do what we call senior council. Now, I believe that perhaps we could reboot that a little bit. And rather than call it just a senior council, let's have a look at it as a community council as well, and allow people to put in applications of knowledge of things that they'd like to present or ask questions about, and have the meeting with a situation where we actually attempt to answer those or one, receive them. I think it makes it more relevant and allows the communicating of the public generally with us as councillors and the staff, and actually work with it. It's something that works quite well in other areas.
Okay. So when Roger returns from wandering the work planet, the two of you can get together and plot a bit of a plan around that.
Well, I was going to make one suggestion. I could ring the college, for example, and ask if 2 or 3 of the head students that would wish to come and sit in on that and listen.
I've got the youth panel program.
I'm not talking a youth panel. I'm just listening if they want to do that. If they want to do that sort of thing, I don't know. It's interesting, just looking at trying to expand it as much as possible to retailers, anyone that wants to come in and talk rather than senior.
It's called community board.
Yeah, not quite. Not quite.
Yeah.
Not quite. Not quite. I'm looking at. Sorry, carry on. I wasn't talking of what we call the open forum and the community board, but I'm talking of something a little bit different to that. Just allowing them to write questions in, and then we can actually see if we can answer them or talk, and we'll take them on board and communicate.
Perhaps we'll take that one offline and flesh it out a bit further. Getting back to the survey here, did you have something to add, Gary?
Yeah, so we're jumping into a lot of solutions right now, but we do have an external communication strategy coming to you for consideration shortly.
Yeah.
So yes, takeaway for us is let's do a bit of a gap analysis just to see where things aren't covered by those internal KPIs. And if there's something that may slip through the cracks, we'll come back to you on that.
Do you think the survey is coming too late in the calendar year? Like because some of this stuff's already been happening.
Yeah, so this is one source of information that we use. Critically, it's timed to, but statutorily we're required to have qualitative data in our annual report. What are the ratepayers feeling about the services we're offering? And so it's time to arrive as we're compiling the annual report, but we are getting updates throughout the year because the survey was run on 4 occasions or 4 months throughout the year. So if we see any trends coming out of that, we can be alerted to that a little bit earlier. So we've just received the survey now. And right now we're compiling the annual report for the last financial year, which you will adopt in October.
And mixed up with annual plan and annual report with you. Yeah.
Great. Look, I think we've talked this one to death, so to speak. So thank you for your report, George. And on the basis that there are no further questions or comments, I declare today's workshop day over and done with. Woohoo.